The European View Podcast. Your place to navigate the insights of our policy journal, brought to you by the Martens Centre. With Sara Pini.
Hello, and welcome to the European View Podcast, your new way to navigate through the main issues of our policy journal with valuable insights from the authors themselves. I'm Sara Pini, Senior Research Officer at the Martens Centre, and today I'm very happy to welcome Steven van Hecke, who is a member of the Martens Centre Academic Council and professor in European politics at the KU Leuven. A great professor, I must say. I would have loved to have you as my teacher. Welcome, Steven.
Hello, Sarah.
So in this episode, we will speak about the article that you wrote with Lien Jansen and Lune Bernstein in the recently published spring issue of the European View, titled Navigating Brain Drain in the Western Balkans. And of course, as usual, you can find this and all the other articles of the latest European View on our website, martenscenter.eu. So, in your article, you analyze the attention that the Commission pays to the issue of brain drain in the Western Balkans through an analysis of the annual country progress report for Western Balkan candidate countries or potential candidate also. First of all, I found the methodology that you use quite interesting. So could you first briefly explain the way you proceeded?
Yes, I would love to. But let me first emphasize that, of course, that we think it's an article on a very salient topic. Of course, it's not the first on brain drain, not the first on the Western Balkans, not even the first on brain drain on the Western Balkans, but we are the first to look indeed at the European Commission annual progress reports. Since this is considered to be a major issue, not only for the current member states, but also for the future member states, the question is, of course, does it also prove in the writings of the European Commission? And therefore, we systematically analyzed all Commission progress reports of all the 6 Western Balkan countries. And for some of them, like Montenegro, who have been in this trajectory for quite some time, it's quite a number of documents. I think overall we have more than 50 documents which we looked through and checked whether there is a reference with regard to brain drain or not, whether this is positive or negative, or whether this is linked to one or another topic.
And what were your main findings?
Well, there were a few. First of all, that we expected more references to brain drain. I think this is largely, not only probably by the Commission, but still largely an underestimated phenomenon, partly, of course, of political reasons. It's a little bit a taboo, both in the current member states, but also in the applicant. Nobody really likes to talk what are the negative consequences for both sides. I think for the applicant countries that they lose the most promising part of their population, while the current member states in the short term benefit from it, but of course in the long term it's not also in their interest. So there are certainly references. It's not always clear to see a kind of a red line or what is systematically in some countries. For instance, North Macedonia, sometimes it pops up and then it disappears and then it pops up again. So it's difficult to say what is then the reason behind. Largely speaking, we expected more references, and we expected also a more positive view as far as the European Commission is concerned. So there's a lot of warnings about a brain drain, but not really suggestions how to deal with it. So I think this is a first step, basically the outcome of this research, but certainly much more needs to be done.
Yeah, and in the final recommendation at the end of the article, you also deplored the lack of what you call an integrated approach to the issue by the European Commission. What would such an approach look like in your view? What should the Commission tackle?
Yes, I think if the Commission is serious with brain drain and with a democracy, and I think it is, it should also apply it. It should also apply it systematically to its progress reports, because brain drain is not only an economic issue. It's not only about the promising part of the society that is leaving, and then you might have problems in business in certain sectors, but it's more an overall political problem. It means that probably the way you are governing your country is not very attractive for young people, that you lose talent, which has also social, human, even political consequences, because those who leave probably are most in favor of European integration. So it would be interesting to see that brain drain, generally speaking, demographic issues, and brain drain is an essential part of it, is not only tackled only from an economic perspective, but from a broader perspective.
And there's also another thing you say, you advocate for brain circulation policies, and that made me curious. What is the difference between brain drain and brain circulation?
Brain drain is a one-way road. So that what we most of the time see, and especially within the EU itself, because you have free movement of people. So you cannot prevent that, for instance, somebody from Croatia leaves Croatia and starts business or starts working in another country. And then most of the time, the person also starts to have a family. It's very unlikely that this person will ever return. And if he or she returns, it's probably only for holidays or retirement reasons. This is, of course, a phenomenon that you cannot avoid, that it's perfectly legal. It's even encouraged, this kind of mobility schemes. The problem is, of course, when you do it in a massive way, then you organize problems in the countries that, of course, that lose these brains. And this is also what is currently happening with applicant and member states. So we have a bit of a similar problem with the migration issue. I think we should also think about brain drain in terms of a circulation and not only a one-way road. So that means that it's probably a good thing to encourage that people get new skills, experiences in other countries, but there should also be, so you have this kind of push factors, but you also should have pull factors. The European Union and European Commission should encourage member states and applicant member states to also have specific schemes that make it more attractive for their citizens to return to their country. We should not only have it for people with a lot of money, this so-called golden passports. That is something that we should get rid of. It's not a good idea, I think, in the long term, that you attract non-EU and nationals just because of their money and you give them citizenship. What is much more important, what is much more efficient and making the societies resilient in the long term, is that you are able to perform a kind of a scheme that can bring your own people back to the country, and they have added value because they have experiences, they maybe had business skills. That is what I think the European Commission should encourage.
Okay, thanks. This was not the first time that you dealt with this topic. In an op-ed, for example, in an op-ed that you published last November in the Tide, you speak about a double taboo. On one side, politicians from Western Europe hesitate to advocate labor migration policy to their countries. But on the other side, those from the East do not really like to be reminded about this problem of depopulation and brain drain that affect their countries. Actually, I would also add from the South, because I don't know the other countries, but my country, Italy, it's quite affected by the problem and doesn't seem very keen on tackling it either. But then there is an exception. You mentioned in both the European View article and the op-ed, which is Croatia. Croatian leader, Croats in general, don't seem to shy away from the issue, right? Actually, they're pretty vocal on it. And I was wondering, how could you explain this different sensitivity?
I think that the Croatians are much more aware than many other countries. They are ready to face the problem, since Croatia itself lost, I think, 1/5 to 1/6 of its population over a period of almost 20 years, so 10 years, so a couple of years before they became a member, and also the decade after. So this is also a serious problem. It certainly also applies to the number of other member states, but at least the Croatian government, the Croatian politicians are aware of it. So this is even larger than just becoming a member of the EU, because as the Croatian example proves, it does not stop once you become a member. You just start a kind of a new brain drain, because it's much more easy. Those who didn't leave yet can easily leave because of free movement of people once you become a member. I don't know the exact reason, but I think it's a good thing to put it on the table because indeed, I think it can help us to get rid of a double taboo. A number of governments, a number of member states in Central and Eastern Europe are seriously facing brain drain vis-à-vis Western Europe. This is, as I said before, probably in the short term into the benefit of Western European economies because we have labor shortages in various sectors. And honestly speaking, a lot of Western Europeans rather see people from Central and Eastern Europe than a bit further away, to formulate it in a nice way. At the same time, this is also a short-term solution for Western Europe because it's not in our long-term interest that member states of Central and Eastern Europe are actually bleeding, that they are going down in economic ways, but also probably which also affects the quality of their democracy. The other taboo in Western Europe is that if Western European countries want to keep their welfare standard, given already the labor shortages and the aging society, we will need more legal, massive labor migration. I always put an emphasis on both legal and massive. So we need to get rid of illegal immigration. We need to limit it as much as possible, but we also need more labor migration. This cannot just be like taking everyone from Central and Eastern Europe. We also have to take into account that we will need also an influx from third countries. This is, of course, something that some politicians agree on, but most don't, because if you would sell it as a kind of a political a proposal, you would rather lose than win the elections, I'm afraid. Nonetheless, there are a number of good signs. I think that at least this commission already tackled it, and it will certainly be again on the agenda in the next 5 years because demographic decline is a serious issue, or demographic change in general, and also the forthcoming enlargement reminds us of issues that we still need to deal with before we give access to other member states to join the European Union.
Good. So let's speak about the future then. So I said before that Italian leaders also share this brain drain taboo, but actually here too there is an exception because former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta recently published this report that has been commissioned almost a year ago by the European Council on the single market. And in the report, he says that we should have a freedom to stay that should accompany the traditional freedom of movement or freedom to move, as says in the report. Do you see this as a good omen for the next legislature? Because, of course, now it's too late to implement, but maybe for the next term?
Certainly, yes. We have reasons to be pessimistic, but we also have reasons to be optimistic. The reason to be pessimistic is that this is not entirely a new issue. We have been dealing with it, with brain drain, within the member states. And if we look at, for instance, France for sure, but also Italy and even Flanders within Belgium, we're also struggling it, maybe to a lesser degree. We didn't come up with good solutions yet. At the same time, we cannot wait for these solutions because the problem is already arising between the member states. So we cannot wait for that. That's perhaps the pessimistic part of the story. The optimistic part is indeed that the Letta report refers to it, that we should get rid of the idea that everyone needs to be mobile. This is probably not applying to everyone and every sector and every profession, that maybe it's a good idea to stay and to also invest in local economies, in local societies. We all need them. And not everyone needs to move to big cities. Not everyone needs to move to more wealthy member states. We need to have a European Union that offers schemes that is interesting for many people in different places. So therefore, the idea of Enrico Letta, the right to stay, is not a very bad idea at all, I think.
And is a bit in line with the two narratives that you're speaking about in your article, right? We are focusing too much on the push factor, not enough on the pull factor, you were saying.
Yes, the European Commission itself should perhaps think about some creative program to keep people where they are, so to keep not to keep them busy, but also to be creative and to be entrepreneurial in the area where they already are. But it's certainly also something for the member states. Once again, I think the member states have a huge responsibility. They, first of all, need to have interesting policies that people do not necessarily feel the need to leave in order to improve their personal life, their professional life. I think there is still a lot to be done for a number of member states and its governments.
Okay, thank you very much, Steven, for your insight, and thank you for joining us. And for those listening in, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and discover all the interesting insight of the European View on matercenter.eu and on all our social media channels. Thank you, and stay tuned for more.
This was the European View podcast, your place to navigate the insights of our policy journal. Follow the Martens Centre for more.